from Sally Tomato, and we're here at Bargains Galore in Waupun, Wisconsin. We have a fun video for today. We're gonna do a thrift flip. So let's go inside, see what cool stuff we can find. Then we're gonna take it back to the studio and turn it into something new. So let's go. I actually like this leather jacket. It's really soft. It has some neat seams that could be featured on a project. It's a little thick though, so I think we'll keep looking. I actually found this one that I really like. It's got some really cool zippers. We could totally repurpose these pockets for something else. I love the snaps. And then this is just a fake pocket, which could be a fun detail. And then the strap on the bottom with the buckles and the eyelets, that could be converted into something else. I think we're gonna go with this one. This is neat with the lace on here, and then also the embroidery. That's pretty. Let's see what else we can find. Wow, look at that. That could be an overlay on a project over top of the fabric. Let's see what else we can find. Some more lace. That's really pretty. Might have to get that. So I actually really like these artificial flowers. It could be neat to add these as applique on a tote or the front of a purse. So I have a really neat idea for these. I think we're gonna get these too. Alright, so I think we're gonna go with this one. I think it could be a really neat overlay on top of some fabric and add some texture for an elegant bag. We're gonna take it back and see what we can do. Alright, so $5 for the flowers, $10 for the leather jacket, and then $3 for the lady's lace blouse. So we totaled at $18.99. I think we did pretty good. Let's go back to the store and see what we can make. Alright, so I'm back in our main office studio, and I'm excited to dive into these projects and share some really great tips with you guys for deconstructing garments, how to do some unique applique, and preserve and use as much of the material as possible. So let's go ahead and start with the leather jacket. So another tip is to keep in mind that you don't have to start from scratch. You can use an existing pattern and incorporate some of the elements into a pattern that you already have and create an entirely new bag that's unique and repurposed and recycled. So if you are using an existing pattern, be mindful of the cutting instructions and that also the fabric stabilization might need to be altered so that way whatever material that you're using will work with your pattern. So you might feel really inspired by some of the elements on the garment that you're using or the material that you're using. So feel free to come up with your own pattern, draft a design around the elements, and just let your creativity flow. Otherwise, feel free to use an existing pattern. That might be a good way to start for your first thrift flip project. So I've just pulled some patterns from our current pattern line, and I wanted to walk you through kind of my thoughts for these patterns and why I thought they would be good for this specific jacket. So first I pulled this charade bag sample, and instead of adding on these cork fabric corners, I thought it would be really cool to incorporate this shoulder strap element across each side of the bottom of the bag. So I would cut this out and end up stitching this into the side seam so that way it would wrap around each side of the front. So I'd have one on each side. And then of course the strap with the buckle would look super neat with the strap from the jacket and just had a different element. So the back side of this jacket is plain. It's just all one piece of material. There are some stitching elements on the back where it's pieced together, but I think that would be really neat incorporated on this charade bag. So the next pattern I pulled is the Casey duffel bag, and this pattern already has some masculine elements into the design with the straps and the side hardware, but I thought it would be really neat and different to incorporate in some of the pockets. So we could cut the front pocket out here so we had an additional flap element. You could also add on another zipper pocket across the front depending how you cut it. It could also turn into a concealed carry pocket if it was placed on the side here. So this is another fun option, especially out of the leather. So the next pattern I was inspired to use was Molly. This is a large satchel pattern, and I thought it would work well with the jacket because of the side straps and then also the handles. It kind of has that edgy look to it. And then also, since it is a larger satchel, it has this big area here for featuring maybe this entire front zipper across at an angle would be neat. There's a lot of unique things that could be done with this pattern as well. Next, of course, I had to pull the ginger bag pattern. This is one of our beginner-friendly patterns, and the front zipper here would be perfect to cut out with one of these zippers, and we could utilize that area. We might even use this side with kind of a unique detail on there, or you could even just cut out the pocket area and then stitch together or piece together other areas if you didn't have enough fabric, since on this side it looks like the bottom edge of the bag would run into this main zipper here. So we could cut out the zipper pocket and then piece it together before we cut out our pattern piece. Next, I pulled the Miranda bag pattern, and again, I think that shoulder strap detail would look really cool coming from each side and having it snap in place on the sides for extra detail. And the straps in the pattern are a 1/2 inch wide, but we could definitely use these 1 inch wide straps from the jacket. And since there are 2 of them and they're very long, they'd be long enough for the shoulder straps on the Miranda pattern. And this pattern, you can use fabric with combination of cork or faux leather. I think we might have enough fabric from this jacket to make the entire bag out of the jacket. And then also I pulled the lucky $2 wallet. I think this would make a really fun accessory to go with the Miranda bag. So let's get started deconstructing this garment. So obviously when deconstructing a garment, everybody's process might be a little bit different. So I've made this video for you guys just to share some of my tips and my process, but feel free to do what works best for you and your pattern and to get the end results that you desire. So I'm going to try to save as much fabric and these unique pocket elements as possible. So I'm going to start by opening up the side seams. And you can use a seam ripper or your scissors, depending if you think you have enough material and you can just cut right through the seam. But if you need that extra seam allowance, then you might want to seam rip that area. I'm just going to show you the back side. So here I have this huge open space. So I'm going to be using the Miranda bag pattern, and this will be great for my main panels. I actually don't mind these side stitchings here, that's extra detail, and along the bottom. So that could be fun if you need to piece some fabrics together. If you have a larger pattern piece and you don't have enough material to cut out the exact size like I do, then notice some of the top stitching and how the fabrics are seamed together, and you can just mimic that same style to make it look original and create an entire new piece. That could be a feature or a brand new element to your project that you wouldn't have even guessed. And you could piece it together just straight lines, kind of similar to this, or it could be even fun to add in some curved pieces and create a unique look that way. So however you think for your particular design. Another tip that I wanted to share with you is that it might be helpful to trace your pattern pieces on a translucent tracing paper, and that way you can lay out your pieces and fussy cut certain elements of the coat or whatever project that you're cutting from and have that exact element centered where you need it. Another tip is to take a look at the lining fabric inside the garment. Is there enough to use as the lining of your bag or your project that you're making? So you can also reuse this lining. Now this is a really lightweight nylon fabric, so if I add some interfacing to this, I think we'll be able to reuse it. Also, I think this tag is really fun. I'd like to put this on the inside of the lining. It's kind of a little bit of history for where the bag came from after we have it final constructed. So that'll just remind us that it's a unique, one-of-a-kind item. I encourage you to keep all of your scraps as you cut up the garment, and it could be turned into an accessory. You could make tassels, a coordinating key fob. Try to use as much as the fabric as possible. I challenge you to be creative and to use the elements as much as possible and have minimal waste for this project. And once you create that mindset to not waste and to use as much of the fabric as possible, you're gonna start looking at your belongings and your fabrics differently and become less wasteful and more mindful. So let's get started cutting this project. First, I'm gonna cut off the straps very close to the seam because I want to use as much of the fabric as possible. And the same for the other side. Next, I'm going to cut up the side seam, and I'm only going to cut through one layer because I don't want to cut into that lining fabric in case we need more of the lining. So as I reach the seam, I'm just going to cut around the sleeve because we might need the sleeve later on. And I definitely want to preserve these straps at the top of the shoulders. So I think what I'm going to do is just cut along the seam. And this part is just stitched down. There's actually no snap on the other side. So I'm just going to cut the stitches to make sure that it stays preserved. Awesome, super cute. And then I want to save this strap too. So I'm just cutting through the stitches to make sure that I save that other part of the strap. Then I'll continue cutting around the sleeve. Okay, so since I'm here, I'm just going to cut the seam open for the lining. Okay, now this whole piece can be set aside. I'm not sure if we'll incorporate this side element in this particular pattern, but I'd love to save it for the next one. So as I'm deconstructing this jacket, I noticed that there's a strip of fabric that's sewn into the lining seam and then also the exterior seam. So that way the shoulder lining fabric doesn't fall down or slide away from the exterior fabric. So I think that's a really neat tip. When you're deconstructing these garments, you might get ideas and for how mass-produced items are created and how we can incorporate them into our handmade projects to make them more professional and have those results, because you always wonder, how did they get that look? How did they get that to stay and hold without wrecking their machine? I know a lot of companies use the industrial machines, and we are working on our home sewing machines, but those simple tricks are easy to incorporate into our projects to get those professional results. So you never know what you're gonna find when you start deconstructing a garment and get ideas from that. All right, so we've got the whole back panel detached, and this is kind of interesting here with the seam, but we want to make sure that we save our lining fabric. So this is the facing part of the lower hem, and I'm just going to cut along the lining hem to try to save the lining so we have enough for our project. And if there isn't enough lining from this garment, I could always look in my closet for another shirt, whether it's a knit or a similar material to this, and incorporate it into this project and repurpose that shirt in a new way too. All right, so here we have one whole entire piece that we can use. What a great way to save on fabric and to repurpose. This is way cheaper than buying leather from the store, and it also saves from the landfill. So I'm actually gonna leave that shoulder seam in the lining because we might need those pieces pieced together to use that big lining to have enough fabric anyway. Ooh, I love this pocket in here. So somehow it might be nice to incorporate this into the lining. So I'm actually gonna cut along the zipper here, and perhaps we can piece that in and save that part. All right, now that this is cut open, you can also see where the lining for the pocket is inside. So you just have to be mindful when cutting out your pattern piece to make sure that you save that lining in there. And the same for the other side. And I might not use this collar for this particular project, so I'm gonna cut off the collar, and it'll make the pieces flat and much easier to cut out for my bag. And also I cut out the tag from the jacket so that way we can include it in the lining of our bag to remind us of where the project originally came from. I'm gonna start by cutting out my largest pieces first. So that would be the back panel. So I've measured my back panel, and there's gonna be plenty of room along the back side of the jacket to also cut out that front pocket area. Then the smaller pieces I'll be able to get out from the front panels of the jacket. I think this back panel turned out so neat. I just have to trim up the side edges. I love that we're gonna be able to preserve some of the stitching detail from the back side of the jacket. So that'll be the back panel for my bag. And then this piece will end up being the accent pocket. And I'm running into a bit of an issue. So for the measurement that I need for the width, it lands right on these thick seams. And I love the detail of these seams, but they're gonna be way too thick for my machine to sew through, I'm thinking. So what I'm gonna do, since I have enough width here from edge to edge, I'm gonna fold this piece in half right along the center, and I'm gonna stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that will reduce the width between the stitch lines by 1 inch. So it'll tighten it up. And I'm gonna trim my seam allowance and top stitch each side edge, and that'll add some extra detail. And then my width measurement will be outside away from those bulky seams. So we're gonna give it a try. So for the straps, I'm using the straps that were along the bottom side of the jacket. And what's nice is that there are these eyelets, so I already adjusted the strap to the length according to the pattern that I need. And the downfall is there's no way of keeping this buckle from coming undone. It's not the best quality of hardware, it's very loose. So you certainly could add your own buckle or slider buckle on there with your own hardware stash, but since I'm trying to use as much of the project as possible, I'm gonna leave the original hardware to the design. So like I said, I already attached it to the eyelet that I need for the measurement, and I'm just going to stitch this end of the strap down in place. So just a simple top stitch. You could add some additional rivets or other hardware that you have on hand for embellishment. And I made sure that the buckle was offset, so when I'm wearing this on my shoulder, the buckle and the seam won't be resting on my shoulder. So that was just another thing that I kept in mind. So once I stitch this down, the buckle itself will not be functional, but it'll just be decorative. I'm super excited about these straps though. I think it's gonna turn out really cool. So looking at my pattern, I'm trying to decide which front panel would be the best to cut out this top panel for the front of the bag. So I need a width measurement here, and then I also need to make sure that I account for attaching those two straps, so I need enough room for stitching. And looking at this side of the front panel, it doesn't really make sense to have this diagonal. I need the width, so this side of the jacket isn't gonna work for me. But I was looking at this side of the jacket with the zipper, and this could be a really cool detail. So this would be, the zipper would be just between the straps and then that top casing of the pocket. So the zipper would run right along there. I think we just embrace it, and this is the fabric that we have to work with anyway. So I'm taking a look ahead at the instructions, and figuring out the placement for the straps, I'm thinking I want the zipper to be a 1/2 inch away from the strap ends. So I'm gonna make sure that when I measure this, I'll measure the placement from where the top edge of the panel should be and make sure that my strap placement will be about a 1/2 inch from the zipper. And I think we're just going to miss this pocket here, so we'll be able to preserve that. I think it's gonna be really awesome. So I have my pattern next to me and I chalked it out so that way you guys could see that I'm accounting for the strap placement and then also make sure that there's a proper seam allowance all the way around the edges, and I'll have enough material and it'll look the way that I want it to look when it's done. So the only problem we're gonna run into here are these metal zippers on the sides. So we're going to have to cut the tape back and cut off some of the teeth, and then I'm gonna glue it down in there. Otherwise I might just cut straight across and then take a lighter and burn the edge so it doesn't unravel. But definitely if you're not comfortable with that, then you'll have to remove the teeth and tack it down somehow into the seam so that way that raw end doesn't start to unravel. So this is all the scrap that I had. As you can see, I tried to use as much as possible. There's barely anything left, and I'm not sure if any of this is usable for this project. Perhaps these scraps could turn into mini tassels or zipper pull tabs. Possibly this could be an accent used somewhere on another project. And I have a lot of material left, so including the sleeves that I set aside earlier, I have this piece that I seamed together. I also have 2 of the front panels with tons of accents and elements that I could use on my next project. So I'm going to save some of these and cut it out to make a coordinating wallet to go with my Miranda bag, and the rest I will save for another project. And here I have the lining. This was the back side of the jacket, and then the 2 front panels, I left them attached at the shoulder seams in case I needed a longer strip. I'm gonna try to incorporate this interior pocket by piecing together some of the lining, and that way it's a nice slip pocket for a phone or a wallet. And then I also need to cut out pieces for the recessed zipper, so I think I will have enough fabric. This fabric is very slick and lightweight. It tends to shred along the edges really easily. So I'm going to add a interfacing to the back. I'm going to use Bosal Fashion Fuse, and that'll stiffen it up, give it a little bit of body, and then also protect it from wear and tear and make it a little bit more durable for a bag lining. So here's what the final pieces for my main fabric and accent fabric turned out to look like. My back panel is going to have this really neat stitching on it. It's going to be a little bit thick to sew through at the very end since the seam will go into the seam allowance, but I think it's manageable. And then I didn't have enough or a big enough piece for the base, so I simply just pieced 2 scraps together and then top stitched it. I think it's going to look great for the bottom of the bag. Here's the top panel that I fussy cut so that way the zipper will show. I trimmed the ends of the zipper and I just have to touch the ends with a lighter. So I'm gonna fold the fabric back and then just bring a lighter to the edge very lightly so that way the ends of the zipper don't fray. You could also use a seam sealant like Fray Check to help keep that end from unraveling. I also have left enough room for piecing with the seam allowance. Here's the front accent of the bag. So this will be pieced together right here. There's the pocket trim. I didn't do the top stitching because after pieced together, the pattern instructions explain to top stitch away from each side of the center mark on the bag, so that way it divides this front pocket panel into 2 pieces. I managed to salvage these unique strap pieces from the shoulders, so I'm going to place 1 on each side here, and those are going to get stitched down in place and sewn into the seam sides. So that's going to look really unique and a fun feature on the bag. I also saved these pieces, so what I might do is just wrap them around and hot glue them in place so I don't have to do any thick stitching through there. And then I'll just top stitch up to that so I don't have to sew over the thickness, and I'll repeat for the other side. And then also the really fun straps that came from the jacket, those will go along the top. This is going to be an incredible bag. I can't wait to see how it turns out. I'm gonna get to stitching. If you like the Miranda pattern, we have a full tutorial on our YouTube channel to show you how to make this bag. Wow, so here are the end results of my Miranda bag. And I also made a matching wallet to go with out of the scraps. I still have lots of fabric left over, so I certainly could make more projects. I absolutely am obsessed with how this final project turned out. The pockets, the details, the straps, the buckles. It was so much fun to incorporate all of the hardware and the different features of the jacket into the final project. Just check out how cool these straps are. They're super unique. This whole project was very sustainable, recycling the jacket into something new. So here on the front we have some nice deep slip pockets for cell phone, keys, sunglasses. We used our faux metal zippers at the top for the zipper closure. And look how cool this bottom of the bag is too. The purse feet just add some extra bling, and they coordinate with the hardware that was already attached to the jacket. So it all looks super seamless. I love how it turned out. And here's how the wallet turned out. I used the same gunmetal zipper and a nickel pull to kind of coordinate with the final bag. And for the lining, I know it's black so it's kind of hard to see, but I did use the interior pocket from the jacket, of the jacket lining, and I used the lining of the jacket to create the lining of the bag. So super professional, and you could certainly do this with other clothes and jackets at home. Maybe a denim jacket would be neat to turn into a Miranda bag. The possibilities are just endless. Next up, we have this lovely little lady, and I've already gone ahead and picked out some patterns for inspiration and brainstorming to figure out which project that I want to turn this into. So I thought it would be fun to use this shirt as an overlay on top of fabric to give a different dimension and texture. I absolutely love lace, and I think it's fun to mix it with modern materials. It's just a timeless classic fabric and design to this lace. So I did take a look at the sleeves. There's elastic at the sleeves, so I didn't know if this would be interesting as a pocket, if the top of the pocket had the elastic and we could simply cut this part of the sleeve, turn the top edge of the sleeve under so we'd have an elastic pocket. So that's a fun option. The neckline also has an elastic ruffle on it, so I didn't know if that could be incorporated into a project. And then there's also a zipper on the other side. So there are a few options for different styles of pockets for this one, but mainly I wanted it because then I could use it as an overlay on top of one of our materials. So I went ahead and picked out some patterns. Wouldn't it be neat to feature this lace overlay on top of cork fabric on a Mackenzie bag? I just thought that was absolutely stunning, and we could pair it with a solid cork and then have the lace over top of the solid to make it really stand out and pop. So that's an option. And we do have a lot of fabric to work with since this is a nice size shirt. Next up, I was inspired by Holly. Holly has that really big front panel, and it could show off the lace really nicely, and the top is more of a slouchy style, so I thought that would work really well with this soft material. Another one was Daisy, and I love how chic and classic this little round bag is. So to me, lace is very elegant, and the Daisy bag would be very fitting for that. And then also I chose our Sylvia bag pattern. This is a mini clutch and you can attach a chain so that way it's a mini crossbody bag with a kiss lock closure. So I think I definitely have to make a Mackenzie bag, but for this tutorial I'm going to pick a little bit simpler of a pattern just to show you guys the process. So we're going to make Sylvia. Another important thing before we start is it's a good idea to wash the garment before you cut into it and start working on your project. That way any shrinkage occurs and you don't have to worry about any unwanted odors, and you can also get rid of stains at that time before it's turned into your bag. So I didn't mention that with the first jacket, but both of the items that I found at the thrift store seem to be in really good condition and barely worn. So I just am going to use them as is. So let's get started with this project too. I'm just going to cut along the side seam, and I'm actually just going to cut off the sleeves because I don't think I'm going to use them for this particular project. And then also, I don't like how the lace looks seamed together, so if I did need a larger piece, I wouldn't end up using it in a seamed area for this particular project. So I need those whole pieces. So I think since this Sylvia pattern is really small, I'm going to cut open the seam in the sleeves. And this area of fabric is definitely big enough for the Sylvia pattern piece. So I think we just need one sleeve for the front and one sleeve for the back. And then I'm going to save this large chunk of fabric for when I make the Mackenzie bag. That'll be perfect and gorgeous. I love it. So I'm going to cut one more sleeve. Perfect. Now before we cut out the pattern pieces, I'm going to audition what fabric I want to use behind the lace. So I pulled some scraps of faux leather and cork fabric. Here I have a concrete pebble. So that gives more of a lighter look. And I chose a couple neutrals. Since I used a pink lace, I thought a neutral background would be a lot better than another color, but you certainly could do a pop of color behind. Maybe a green would be fun and it would look more like a garden. Or even a purple or a darker pink or a lighter pink. So that looks a little bit busy. This is a black cork with a gold fleck, but if that's your style, then you'd have a little bit of sparkle in there. And then a darker gray. There's another option. And then also I have a scrap of natural cork with silver fleck. I found that natural is generally a really good cork just to have on hand because it goes with pretty much everything. I actually really like how this charcoal cork looks behind here. The darker makes the pink stand out a little bit more, but it's still neutral and classic looking. So I think we're gonna go with this one. So there are a couple ways that you can attach your lace to your cork fabric. The lace is very stretchy and it tends to move around on top of the smooth cork, but I'll show you some of the ways that I would recommend to attach it. So first off, you'd want to cut out your pattern piece out of the lace and also out of the cork. So I still am just working with the larger pieces just to demonstrate how I would do this. But after you have both pieces cut out, you could align all the edges and then use some sewing clips around the edges to hold the pieces together and in place. And then you can simply just stitch either an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch all the way around the edges of the pattern pieces to attach them together. So the center part will still be loose. So I do have another recommendation. So what you would do is you would do your outline stitch, and then you could do some kind of quilting design. So you could do vertical rows of stitching, maybe spaced 1 inch apart, and that would help prevent the lace from shifting on top of the cork fabric. Or you could do an all over design, maybe a scroll, or you could even stitch around the petals per se, whatever you'd like to help tack it down even further. So also, instead of just the sewing clips to help hold it down even more, I'd take a scrap of newspaper, put your lace down on top of the paper, and then add some spray. And you can spray the back side of it. And this is Sulky KK2000. It's super sticky, it's just a temporary adhesive. So after a few hours, the air will evaporate the stickiness and it won't be sticky anymore. So this side will have the spray on it, and then you can take your fabric and put the sprayed side down and stick it in place. And that'll help prevent it from shifting as you're stitching around. So I'm gonna go ahead, cut out my pieces, attach the lace to the cork fabric, and work on making the Sylvia bag. So I'll check back after I'm done sewing this project, but we're gonna move on to the next one with the flower applique. And I wanted to show you guys, here are the final results of the coin purse that I made with that lace dress shirt. I think it turned out super pretty and elegant. So what I ended up doing was stitching down the lace to the cork fabric in some areas around the flowers to make sure that it stayed. And then I just sewed it up using our Sylvia coin purse pattern, and this pattern debuts February 2022. And it's just a great little evening bag for just a couple essentials, lip gloss, your keys, and some important cards. And here's what the inside looks like. There are some card slots, and we just glued in the cork fabric and the lace into the frame. So there's no raw edges that are going to fray on this little bag. And you could certainly just pop this in your purse for organizing your purse, or you could use it as a crossbody bag by attaching a chain strap. So I absolutely love how this turned out. So I bet you've been wondering, what on earth am I gonna do with this bouquet of flowers and turn it into a purse? Well, instead of turning it into a purse, we are going to decorate a purse. I think it'll be super fun. We'll have a bouquet to carry with us wherever we go. So I'm gonna take an existing bag pattern that I've already created, and we are going to refashion it and repurpose it so it's brand new. It's gonna be super fun. So this is our circle bag pattern. There's no lining in it, so it's a very beginner-friendly project. You can make it out of faux leather, cork fabric, or any other fabric that doesn't fray. So this is a very classic style round bag, but it's a little bit drab, so we're gonna go from drab to fab, my friends, and add on some flower applique. So I'm gonna start by popping off some of the flowers. I'm gonna save my favorite ones. I feel bad for taking this apart because it is such a pretty arrangement, but you could certainly reuse the flowers. The plastic in the bottom that's supposed to be water is a little yellowed, so that doesn't look the best, but the glass could be spray painted and repurposed as just a regular vase for natural flowers, for real flowers. Oh, I like these red ones too. You could certainly add a little bit of greenery around it too. And some of the larger leaves. All right, so I think we're gonna start with this bunch. If we need more, there's plenty more to choose from. So next I'm gonna arrange these how I think that I want to on the circle bag. So I'm working with about an 8-inch area for the front to embellish. Of course I'll want this big one in the center. I think we can add some of the small leaves around, and then we can top it off. Sprinkle in the red ones. Normally when you make floral arrangements, you start with your greenery first, and then you add on the little embellishments, and you end with your main show pieces at the end. So I've actually really gotten into floral arrangements, and I was inspired when I saw this in the thrift store and thought, how cool to combine both of my hobbies together into one project. So, kind of an idea of what I'm going for. The main rose in the middle, the smaller roses on the sides, and the greenery to just embellish it even more. So there's probably way too many flowers here, but we'll get out the hot glue gun and start adding these. So I cut off the stem, so I tried to make the flower as flat as possible on the bottom. I'm gonna add a generous amount of glue to the back side and center it on top of the bag. Okay, then we can start adding some of the flowers. I think the smaller leaves and the smaller flowers will work better, and we'll want the center part to really stand out, so we'll just have a couple pops of color along the side and the leaves. So I don't think I'm gonna add any more leaves or flowers to this. I think it turned out really cool, and it only took a few minutes to add a new flair to a bag that we just had in our stash. So it adds a neat dimension, and it brings the whole bag to life, and it looks like it's come to life. With this bag, you're gonna feel like you're carrying around a bouquet, and who wouldn't wanna do that and add a little bit of freshness and color and texture to their outfits and every day. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm gonna show you the end results of how my Miranda bag and the Sylvia bag turned out. Another tip is to have hardware on hand for reinforcing and stabilizing areas, and also just adding embellishment. Some great pieces to have are Chicago screws, rivets, grommets, tassel caps for making tassels out of scraps of fabric, and also strap connectors. Hardware comes in handy for attaching unique details and also for reinforcement on some areas that might be thick from heavy stitching or glues. It's super important to use a quality thread for your projects. I highly recommend sewing with polyester thread for making bags because it's durable, very strong. This one is from Sulky. It has a nice sheen to it, and I use polyester thread for all of my projects. Next, you'll want to make sure you select the correct needle type and size according to the material that you're working with. A lot of times when you buy a garment from the thrift shop, there will be the fiber contents on the tag, but you won't necessarily know what type of fabric it is. Generally, you'll get by with a universal needle or a microtex needle or even a denim needle depending on your material. But just test it out and see which needle works best before you dive into your project. You'll also want to have a variety of presser feet handy in your sewing room for sewing on different thicknesses, different types of fabrics to make your project easier to sew. So this is a Teflon foot that I attach to my machine. Usually I can get by with leaving this foot on my machine for the entire project, but it's really handy for those slicker fabrics such as cork, faux leather, and real leather. Other notions that come in handy are a variety of adhesives such as Loctite super glue for just gluing hard to sew places, reinforcing hardware and other areas. So this is one of my favorite super glues that I like to keep handy in my sewing stash. A temporary basting spray is great for attaching interfacings and stabilizers, for quilting, and a variety of other applications. A seam roller is super helpful for pressing seams open and adding creases in projects. A quality pair of scissors is necessary for cutting open seams, appliques, and just simply trimming threads in part of your project. If you're using rivets for your project, you'll want a rivet setter and anvil. I love sewing with a stiletto. This is our Sally Tomato Essential Turning and Creasing Tool. So you can use it to crease fabrics, you can use it to poke out corners, as a stiletto as you're sewing. I've found that it takes a little bit of practice to use the stiletto, but after you use one, you get used to it, and you always keep it by your side at your sewing machine. Make sure you have some removable chalk or pens. I love a good iron away pen, and then also chalk is also super helpful. Having a variety of colors, a light and a dark, is also great. A rotary punch comes in handy for installing all types of hardware. It's not just for rivets. You can use it for punching holes for screws, purse feet, prongs, all kinds of things. And lastly, wonder clips. These are essential for clipping together thick layers and fabrics that you can't pin through. This has been so much fun, and I hope these projects inspire you to visit your thrift shop or search in your closet to create something new. So remember, cut your largest pieces first. So whether you're creating your own pattern or you're using a pattern that's already out there, then you'll want to cut those bigger pieces so to make sure that you have enough material to work with. And also save all of your scraps. You might have to piece together some of the fabric to cut out additional pieces for the project that you're making, or you may want to make an accessory to coordinate with your final project. I absolutely love that sewing is sustainable. And because of our knowledge of sewing, we have the ability to recycle and repurpose things that are old and give them a brand new life by turning them into something new. I want to challenge you to look at your closet, find something that doesn't fit quite right, but you still love the fabric, and turn it into something new. I hope that you are going to look at your belongings a little bit differently now, and when you go thrift shopping, see that the possibilities are truly endless. I hope that this tutorial was super fun and inspiring, and you learned lots of tips about deconstructing garments, some helpful notions that can help you along the process, and hardware for not only embellishment but also helping with structure. If you liked this thrift flip video, let us know by leaving a comment and giving this video a thumbs up if you want to see more tutorials and inspirational videos like this. This was truly fun for me to make, and I am just astonished at how the projects turned out to be. They were better than I even imagined. So, we'll see you next time. And always don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspirational videos and sewing tutorials. We'll see you next time.